I have a relatively large number of clients, and the topic of panic plays a central role in the work I do for them. This is also because panic disorders are relatively widespread, and almost everyone has experienced at least one of these situations where they felt that the fear was becoming so great that, for example, a flight reflex sets in, or they are literally in a panic. It is possible for panic disorders, for example, to occur in isolation, so-called isolated panic disorders. However, panic disorders can also happen, or feelings of panic, as part of another psychological diagnosis, like agoraphobia with panic disorder. For instance, this is the fear of agoraphobia, or more specifically in the present circumstances where I am unable to go outside due to the fear of encountering an uncomfortable situation or a potentially risky health condition and being unable to leave that situation. Frequently, a sensation arises in that place where the individual promptly recognizes that something is incorrect, they desire to get away, their heart rate increases, and so forth and so on. Typically, a panic disorder should not be trivialized, meaning that one should not tell someone not to make a big deal out of it, as it is generally the case. It is also highly stigmatized, so only a very limited number of people discuss it openly. The stigmatized thing is not necessarily that other people talk badly about panic patients, but that one fears that one will be talked about badly. That's why many people keep it to themselves for a long time when such symptoms first appear. In essence, it is the case that our mind has a tendency to throw us into a panic situation because, in principle, we are still genetically the same as our ancestors from 50,000 years ago in terms of evolution, and our evolutionary development has not significantly changed over this vast span of time. What we are able to observe is essentially that, throughout the course of the past 50,000 years, the process of evolution has continued at a certain constant speed. And what has occurred in relation to social development over the past 10,000 years is merely entering a highly significant disparity. And at this present moment, we find ourselves in a social and environmental construct where we simply no longer understand the reasons behind why our mind still reacts in certain ways. Our mind tends to make relatively digital decisions in situations. That means our head doesn't say, "This is now 28% life-threatening," but it says life-threatening or not life-threatening. And in the moment when our head interprets life-threatening danger in relation to anything, a whole cascade of processes is triggered in the body. Specifically, the particle attitude is to be noted, which is expected to ensure us a survival advantage temporarily. Many things happen in the body during sympathetic stimulation. The most important thing in principle is that our muscles experience a high level of blood flow in order to receive a lot of oxygen, in order to be able to fight a lot or flee a lot. Here one also speaks of the so-called fight or flight principle of our body fighting or fleeing. And at the interface, for instance, it is like this. If the muscle should be better supplied with blood, for instance, pulse rises, heart beats faster, you can feel it in your chest. Some patients notice palpitation, it bangs me down to under my chin. You can tell, for example, also that the breathing accelerates because the body wants more oxygen. What you often notice is that you start to sweat a little, it feels uncomfortable. This is because during a panic reaction, the body experiences a phenomenon known as vasoconstriction. This indicates that the blood vessels in the periphery contract in order to centralize the blood flow to the important organs. However, this also goes hand in hand with becoming a little pale and experiencing cold sweats. There are some clients who also experience, for example, that walking suddenly feels like walking on clouds. Nausea, including diarrhea symptoms. Vomiting can also occur in case of doubt. And what many people describe, for example, is that they have the feeling that they are walking around like under a glass bell, or that they have the feeling that they are standing about half a centimeter beside themselves. Always be cautious, as things may feel less real. When consulting a psychiatrist about this symptom, expressing a sense of decreased reality, and receiving a diagnosis of derealization experience, the patient acknowledges the diagnosis but believes it is incorrect as it points in the completely wrong direction. That means it's so psychoelastic. That's not it at all, for God's sake. A panic disorder already indicates that the body doesn't want something the way the boss does, but usually not from a serious illness. Physically, it makes sense to have the thyroid checked. Then you go to the dermatologist and say, I have inner restlessness. Can you check the thyroid gland? He says, sure, we'll do TSH, T3, T4 in the blood test. Most of the time, however, you don't find anything. It is important to note that a panic disorder is never a signal from the body, which is trying to communicate to you to do this or that exactly from now on. It is generally a signal from our body or our head, kindly request you to stop doing what you are doing at the moment. That means we have a model with at least 272 dimensions. There is already somewhere, I would say, this iceberg below the water surface, where things have happened, where one may think about whether I might change some things and thought patterns in my life. The moment of panic, though, is more characterized by what is happening in terms of the situation, and I would like to discuss a little bit about how to approach these two levels at this time. On one hand, it is crucial that our mind reacts to certain things, even if they are not immediately understandable from the outside, as our perception can provide valuable insights. Many panic patients, panic is basically the physical intensification of the normal fear reaction. First, check their environment to see what could cause such a great fear here. Often people don't find what they're looking for and then say something's not right in my head or in my body. And the most crucial aspect that you can initially work on is a sensation. In the majority of instances, a type of feedback mechanism for three specific factors that are of utmost importance. To start with, what do I see at the internal processing level? What do I perceive in the images formed within my mind's eye? What am I talking to myself about? And to some extent, I do the things I like to do, and I let the things I don't like to do be written as well. This is somewhat subsumed under the term of so-called personal integrity, abbreviated PE. But most importantly, what do you see in your mind's eye and what do you say to yourself? Because particularly in times of panic or during a panic disorder, we humans have a tendency to envision the worst-case scenario in our mind's eye, which is frequently accompanied by auditory experiences. We engage in self-talk or even experience induced auditory perceptions. That means such a typical situation for a panic disorder is there is someone, something unpleasant happens to them, or they have a not-so-great illness, and the patient says to themselves, what if I also get that too? And suddenly, there they are, the photographs that depict oneself in an extremely unfavorable situation. And then we also rapidly experience the body's response in terms of this panic. This is something that is incredibly important to get under control in the first step of addressing the situation. Usually, panic reaction is not a reaction to things happening around in today's time, characterized by security. In the zoo, a lion comes up to you, then you also have a sympathetic irritation, and that doesn't have much to do with inner processing. In an initial step, however, we should always initially examine more closely what a patient experiencing panic sees in his mind's eye. What is someone afraid of? Where does someone have questions without answers yet, for example? In essence, it is primarily concerned with the concept of content capture, resembling the nature of landscape work or map work to a certain extent. In terms of things where there is simply still a conflict among those affected, is anyone afraid of the next exam? Does anyone fear they'll never find the right profession? Does anyone fear going bankrupt despite having a well-established, secure company? In this construct, the aim is to gain knowledge, and in a second step, but now we are already in the therapeutic model, to gain more control over it, to create images, to change images, to speak differently to oneself. Another level that I would always include as one of the important factors to clarify in the therapeutic construct is the question of the behavioral patterns of a patient experiencing panic or a person affected by panic. It is extremely commonplace to have this comparison or to casually say it in mind on a regular basis. Depending on my mood, I also behave. A person in panic will exhibit recognizable panic behavior patterns that can be observed externally. That means he looks around a lot. He may already have a slightly cramped hand posture due to a tendency to hyperventilate. It is true that there exists an image, a methodology regarding this topic that I previously referred to as the lion image, which can be very well used as an explanation at this point. In short form, lion image, there is a video about it, is also linked. The core idea is imagine you're standing in the zoo and suddenly a lion comes around the corner, and that's an animal that also likes to eat meat. That means it is something that also triggers a trigger in our mind. This triggers a sympathetic irritation, stress hormone reaction. In the traditional sense, we would typically express that due to my fear of the lion, I have a tendency to flee from it. You can also present this in a slightly different way through various theories, namely not because you are afraid in this situation, you run away, but because you run away in this specific situation, so you exhibit this behavior, the feeling of fear arises. If you go a little further into this picture and question the parameters, trigger, and sympathetic stimulation, we can't work with them so much. We can take them out of this equation for now, and what remains depends on how we behave. We also feel. This is a context that also possesses a relatively substantial significance in the diagnosis and therapy of panic disorder, because if I feign, a sensation arises, which is the fundamental message and essence of this image. This also implies that the greater number of behaviors I incorporate into my daily routine as reminders of my panic disorder, the higher the probability that the sensation of panic disorder will reoccur. Example: there was a sense of panic when I was at the dentist. I believed that panic arises during dental visits. This has been a patient for approximately 60 years. The patient then mentioned, I suspect this may also be attributed to a lack of exercise or alcohol consumption. So he started living completely sober and abstinent and rode his mountain bike 40 kilometers every day. Now, though, he consciously avoids alcohol in his daily life to prevent the emergence of panic feelings that could arise. And then we have to say, our energy always follows our focus. And if we are focused on our behavior towards this problem, we will also think about this problem again and possibly panic ourselves again. On one hand, an individual who is affected by panic symptoms should therefore look for behaviors that may manifest or even chronify the panic model in their head in order to better understand and address their condition. Simultaneously, individuals should also search for behaviors that they may not currently possess, but that they could obtain in order to experience greater emotional relief. For example, if someone is sitting on a train and gets a feeling of panic and wants to get out because this flight reflex is coming up, then he can begin instructing himself. It is okay that he is panicking at the moment. He is working on it. Long term, he aims to grasp the topic for himself. It's okay he's panicking now. If he wants to leave, he just departs swiftly. First of all, bring a little peace and acceptance into such a model. And this usually provides the best foundation for training in the long term, so that one is no longer so dominated by this panic. Starting from the ground, it is also natural to have the option of connecting specific exercise patterns with the available space in that particular area. Exercise pattern in the sense that I can, for example, start a breathing exercise because it is very common with a tendency to panic, that I slide into hyperventilation to some extent, so I tend to breathe too quickly. A relatively pragmatic way to change something here is to maintain a breathing sequence. You count to 10 in total. It doesn't have to be seconds now, it can be faster, slower. Take a deep breath counting to 2 as you inhale. Hold your breath counting to 4. Finally, exhale slowly, counting to 10. Most effective when encountering resistance, thus known as lip brake, or when applied against a closed mouth. Otherwise, one tends to exhale too much oxygen, or rather too much air, and later feels unable to breathe properly. This is essentially the same model as when someone then breathes in a bag or inhales and exhales. Our objective is to offer the body the opportunity to build up an increased amount of CO2, as this tension arises specifically in situations characterized by more intense panic symptoms. One feels subjective shortness of breath. I have insufficient oxygen. I've encountered similar patient structures in emergency medical services. Place pulse oximeter on finger, display 100% to indicate sufficient oxygen, reassure everything is fine. The issue is the declining CO2 level. We aim to provide the body with the chance to either inhale and exhale through this breathing exercise or into a bag. Inhale and exhale in order to regain a slightly rising level of CO2 in the bloodstream once more. That is beneficial for our body. It is additionally important to note that the presence of panic symptoms, which is, in reality, a survival instinct of our body, as previously mentioned in the video. Our brain is our ally. It desires to benefit us. And when such symptoms arise, it is beneficial for us not to attempt to remain stationary and breathe to alleviate the panic, but we must start taking action. Our Stone Age colleague, after such a life-threatening impulse, either entered into a struggle for death or fled to death. That means he really had to achieve something. In principle, we no longer have that in our current form of society. We would rather stay sitting there and attempt to eliminate it in some way by remaining motionless. Rarely works, if ever, because our body gives us the energy to get things done. Imagine it like a car. You initiate the engine, disengage the clutch, or place it in neutral and position a brick on the accelerator pedal. This is how our body works. The engine howls. We can unleash full force immediately when we shift into gear. We don't do it in most situations anymore because the situation in our society no longer requires it. Hence, the entirety of stress hormones that are released and cause numerous interactions in the body desire us to have the capability to engage in a significant amount of muscle work. So the most important thing you can do is go out and do physical work. This applies when you have a normal panic reaction somewhere, but also, for example, in a more specific situation like an exam. If you develop panic symptoms during an exam, try to get out, try to get moving, go outside, do push-ups, a few squats to activate your body. The problem is, for instance, that with the previously mentioned vasoconstriction, the narrowing of the blood vessels, the neocortex is no longer as well perfused. These are the two main hemispheres, what most people know as a typical brain, and if it's not well supplied with blood, dizziness can occur. You feel like you're a bit beside yourself, but you can't retrieve information as easily anymore. The brain regions that continue to be well perfused are responsible for our ability to walk, to have a rough appearance, to somehow move away from a given stimulus. But this cognitive, logical thinking, retrieving information in an exam situation, that is simply impaired. And this so-called exam blackout is basically the maximum we can experience in such situations. So, if exam anxiety is a topic, Solange tries to cope with this tense situation by exercising until she has it under control. Very important point. At this point, maybe also a little tip in conclusion, if we suggest to our body that it cannot be that dangerous, then our body usually calms down relatively quickly, or at least reduces its activities somewhat. And we accomplish this by consuming something, or at the very least pretending to consume something. Especially when panicking, we lack appetite. This is also intended by the body to prevent us from eating. It aims to redirect blood from digestion to vital areas. There may also be symptoms such as diarrhea or vomiting. It is important that when you are in such a situation and, for example, chew gum, you suggest to your mind, I am just fooling around this week, for which I can't be blamed. That means if you have a little bit of exam anxiety, which tends, or for example, tend to be in the train, a little bit than a different typical situation, try always to have chewing gum with you and see what happens when you eat chewing gum in such a situation. In conclusion, summarized briefly once again, if you have feelings of panic, can detect panic reactions in yourself, it is really unpleasant. It feels like dying. I can comprehend that as well. I would not desire to belittle that towards someone either. But the important thing is, it is usually not a signal that something is really broken in your body or that you are sick. The presence of panic symptoms in daily life has consistently been more of an indication for the clients I collaborated with that the organism is in good health, but there are other occurrences that serve as a signal to some degree at the processing level. Firstly, ensure that in principle a sensation frequently aligns with a mechanism where something is occurring, upon which your body subsequently responds, for instance, in the context of panic. Do not comprehend your sense of panic as you must perform precisely that at present, but comprehend a sense of panic initially in the way that your body desires you to cease performing what and how you have been performing it thus far. Then you should also bear in mind for yourself that our head and our body are connected through evolution and biology, which is a crucial aspect to consider. Genetically, humans are still trapped in the constraints of this very large scissor principle, and evolution simply cannot keep up with the rapid advancements of society as quickly as needed. Also ensure that, in addition to this quasi-closer examination, you consider what could be the issue on the mental level, so you search for conflicts that are still occupying you somewhere. You have fears for which there are no goals yet. That makes sense. In addition, you should also take a look at how it is in your current situation with your body and evaluate accordingly. Are you drinking enough fluids? Do you perhaps drink too much coffee? Energy drinks, caffeine, drink it as caffeine in tea or also caffeine in energy drinks create an artificial sympathetic stimulation. That means if you experience panic symptoms, initially avoid consuming such foods. You should also be aware that, for example, hypoglycemic states, which sometimes occur physiologically, are not necessarily associated with diabetes, can lead to such symptoms. What is also very important is that many people keep the symptoms to themselves. Maybe they will still tell the family doctor. Based on my practical experience, I highly recommend that you locate a contact individual for this particular topic and simply attempt to establish a counterpart with whom you can engage in a small exchange of ideas. Very often, I would make it clear to people on their own, man, there is this one topic that has been bothering me all the time. And if you can get a little better control over it, then the body also turns down this alarm signal a little. Furthermore, it is of course of utmost importance to have an organic clarification, once again, if there is an increased symptomatology, particularly if it persists over longer periods of time. And then, of course, it is an extremely wide-ranging area regarding the background of such a disorder, what it can be. This implies that if there is doubt, one should always seek professional help. This, for example, excludes other things again at the interface in the process of making a differential diagnosis and works on other aspects. In the end, it is still possible to state the following. You have the ability to get rid of panic attacks, panic disorders, and eliminate them completely from your life. You don't have to handle that your entire life. It's annoying, it's dumb when you have high introspection about panic disorder. I observe all internal occurrences. You can eliminate it. I have never experienced a situation where it remains unchanged with a client. I handled it with each patient, because once people understand for themselves what signals does my body give and how can I interpret them and what can I change in my life. So far, every client has managed to create a good foundation, or rather, to create one to cope with it better.
Have you already seen my most important video for you? You will learn to understand your symptoms and find the path to change. Feel free to also watch this video here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to always stay informed about the latest posts.